So I've been playing the early access campaign of Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3 here on the ROG Ally, and guys, I have to say, I'm pretty impressed with how well this game runs on the Ally. Not only does it look good, but it also performs a lot better than I expected. I'm getting some really nice frame rates that honestly blew my expectations away. So in this video, I'm going to talk about the performance I was getting playing Modern Warfare 3 in the various resolutions on the Ally. We'll compare the different upscaling tech available in game, and then I'll give my initial thoughts about the game. So let's get into it. So to start off, this game looks absolutely beautiful on the Ally. It's got to be one of the best looking games I've played on this handheld. The gunplay feels great and fluid, which made me feel really immersed in gunfights. But going back to the graphics, I played this game on the absolute lowest settings available in game, which I'll have up on screen, and guys, it still looked really good. I feel like we're at a point in video game graphics where some games just look so good already graphically that even if you drop down all the settings to low, they can still look really good. In 30-watt turbo mode, using these settings in this scene at 1080p with upscaling using NVIDIA image scaling at 100% render resolution, we're able to produce a nice looking image while still having a more than playable frame rate average in the high 70s, and that made the game feel very fluid, which for me is very important when playing a first person shooter. I did also try 900p and 720p using the exact same settings to see what kind of performance we can get in these resolutions, and at 900p we get a huge bump in performance as our FPS is now averaging in the low 90s, which is absolutely phenomenal, and the gameplay feels buttery smooth, and we get an improvement in our 1% low as well. 900p is a great resolution for the Ally because it gives you a nice bump in performance while not sacrificing too much visual fidelity. Switching over to 720p, as expected, we gain even more frames, this time pushing us above 100 FPS. 720p is a good resolution if you're really pushing for the best performance possible, but of course the only downfall with 720p is the huge hit you take when it comes to visual fidelity, but nonetheless, still impressive numbers. I played the game mostly at 900p because like I mentioned, 900p still looks great, but it gives you a boost in performance over 1080p. But honestly, if you wanted to play the game at 1080p, you could. The game is so well optimized. Moving over to the upscaling tech, there are quite a few options to choose from, but I'm going to focus on Intel XeSS, NVIDIA image scaling, FSR 2.1, and Fidelity FX Cast. During my testing, I was playing in 30-watt turbo mode on a 1440p 144Hz monitor, but my resolution was set to 900p and my render resolution was at 100%. And at native resolution, we can get an FPS average that is in the mid to high 70s, which is absolutely incredible. Using Intel XeSS, we do gain a few frames compared to native resolution, and we get a very playable FPS average that hovered in the low 80s, and our 1% low did improve as well. But it gets better. Using NVIDIA image scaling, we can get our FPS close to or above 100 FPS because it gives us a huge bump in our performance as our FPS average sits in the high 90s compared to the 80s using Intel XeSS, and the 1% low is higher as well. I will say though, NVIDIA image scaling did produce a blurrier image than the other upscaling tech at the same 100% render resolution. Using FSR 2.1, we get a crispier image compared to NVIDIA image scaling, and once again, we get a very playable frame rate with an FPS average in the low to mid 80s and a really good 1% low. Lastly, we have another AMD upscaling tech called Fidelity FX Cast, and with this, we get a really sharp looking image at 100% render resolution, and our FPS values are looking really good once again. And with this, we get a frame rate average that sits in the mid 70s, which is more than playable. You can't really go wrong with any of the upscaling tech. They all give us a boost in performance compared to native rendering, but if you are going to go for pure performance at 100% render resolution, clearly NVIDIA's voodoo magic with NVIDIA image scaling would be the best one to choose. But if you are looking for a balance of both visual fidelity and performance, FSR 2.1 and Fidelity FX Cast seem to be the best options for that. I also tried to see if we could get a playable frame rate in 15-watt performance mode, and to my surprise, at 900p at 100% render resolution using NVIDIA image scaling, I was able to average a frame rate in the low 60s, but it did dip in the mid 50s at times. But with AMD FreeSync, I couldn't really notice it visually. I can only tell by looking at the FPS values, so quite impressive to say the least. Now, I wanted to mention an issue regarding stuttering that randomly began to occur, and once it started happening, I noticed on the frame time graph that it basically would happen in almost like a pattern-like form. But going into Steam and verifying the game files and restarting the system fixed that for me. There was like 50 plus failed or corrupted files, but once I did that, the stuttering did improve. So with all that aside, I kind of have mixed feelings about the game. On one hand, I really enjoy the gunplay and gameplay in general, and the cutscenes look absolutely phenomenal, but when it comes to the story, I feel like it missed the mark for me, especially with the open area missions. It just really didn't make me feel engaged in the story as much as the old COD missions that are more linear and you have a set objective that you need to complete and you might have an entire army with you or a small squad. But yeah, when it comes to the story, I definitely prefer the older model.